fast and furious overnight. More developments happening. The Syrian government overthrown, as Brett mentioned. The Syrian government fell, ending the 50-year rule of the Assad family after rebel forces seized control of Damascus. Group behind this operation reported to have been carried out by an organization named HTS. And the Syrian opposition that brought down Assad is led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Okay, so that's HTS. I'm sure I butchered it, but HTS is simple enough for us to remember and say. It's been designated a terrorist group. That's an important aspect of this by the Biden administration. United States, UK, UN, and others consider HTS to be an al-Qaeda affiliate, though HTS says, no, we're no longer cousins. We broke ties with them, the Sunni Islamist organization, years ago. Now, the coordinated rebel forces were likely successful because Russia, Iran, Hezbollah have been weakened, distracted in recent months. So this is why they made their move now. Since then, the now ousted President Bashar Assad fled to Moscow, has been granted asylum on humanitarian grounds. All of this sounds ridiculous to say when you're talking about Moscow and you're talking about Vladimir Putin. Humanitarian grounds, though, that's the official word from the Kremlin, in exchange for the security of Russian military bases and diplomatic institutions in Syria. Now, detainees have been released from a prison dubbed the Human Slaughterhouse, prompting celebration across Syria, something we've been keeping our eye on. As armed rebels swept cities across Syria, they flung open detention facilities where rights groups estimated at least 100,000 people were considered missing or forcibly disappeared since 2011 at the hands of the state. Now, this included the Sednaya military prison, a facility notorious as the site of particularly brutal and humiliating methods of torture. That we can tell you. The poor conditions and torture so severe in this infamous prison camp, what have you, so severe that some detainees did not remember their own name or even the time zone they were existing in. Let's talk about the transition of power. Russia's foreign ministry issued a statement on Sunday saying Assad had decided to leave the presidential post and left the country, giving instructions to transfer power peacefully. The statement added, Russia did not participate in these negotiations. That later came the disclosure that Assad had arrived in Moscow. U.S. has already carried out a series of airstrikes against Islamic State to ensure ISIS does not seek to take advantage of the current situation to reconstitute in central Syria, according to a statement from U.S. Central Command. There are 900 troops in Syria that the U.S. says will remain to keep ISIS from regenerating. So I guess before we get to the Biden administration's response here, Brett, what do you make of the statements coming out of the Kremlin? Humanitarian basis. He decided to leave the country.
Right. You do not decide to leave a country out of your own volition just because you decided it was a good time to visit Moscow. Like the things that are circling around this are whenever you hear about Syria, there's a term proxy war where essentially the US is trying to flex its muscle, and so is Russia and Iran, Hezbollah, all those folks, in an attempt to basically exert their power in the region. And this is a loss for Russia, no matter what Putin says about it. This is a time when they say that Iran and Hezbollah have been weakened. It is just one of those, you don't like to, I mean, some people like it because of the result, but generally I think Americans watching from abroad have to choose essentially how much they care about stuff like this. There are people that care about Syria for a bunch of reasons. Some of them are Christians and they value the effect on Christians in Syria, which is a minority. That's a big thing with evangelical groups. Others just don't like that Putin supports Assad, so we have to support the opposite of him. And then there's all these people like in the fragmented left, in internet discourse who really like to point out like the ways that the prevailing narrative is wrong. My analysis completely looking at this from as someone who falls into the category of someone who just kind of like sees it and generally believes that America shouldn't be involved in a lot of wars abroad, but also doesn't want to see like everything deteriorate into a major world war for overreach from America, underreach from America, and then suddenly certain assets that are important getting under attack. I see this as a loss for Putin, a loss for that coalition. And the one thing that ends up happening and has happened in the past in the wake of the fall of, what's his name, Saddam Hussein, and then the fall of various power structures within the region, is that the Islamic State kind of picks up the mantle and says like, all right, so our version of this religion is that there should be this giant caliphate won by war and resecured and constituted in the face of both our prophet and flexing our muscle against like the hegemony of the Americans, even the Russians, even anybody, while taking arms from whoever will fund them. So generally, I think this is just one of those things like, oh my God, for a lot of people, Syria still exists and now there is no Assad. And a lot of people who were pointing out like the little nuances within the struggle have a major development to continue to analyze. And we'll see, honestly. We'll see how Trump claims credit for this. We'll see how Biden claims credit for this. We'll see the long-term fallout in the region, given that a major asset that Putin was propping up in the area is no longer there and has taken a very undeniable L.
Yeah, and to me, what's to come could be chaos, could be great, could be not so great. I mean, this is unknown territory. These rebels seized the perfect opportunity, the perfect storm, if you will. And so here we are. I do want to get to President Biden's response, but first, Brett, well, you tricked us. Apparently you are an expert in this area. I mean, I learned something just listening to your response to, I forget the question, but you certainly do seem to know a lot about this.
I will say the simple, fast answer to seeking humanitarian aid or refuge in Moscow is like, just look at Gaddafi's body being dragged through the streets of Libya, and you will see like humanitarian means they don't tear him limb from limb, and he gets to live this sweet life somewhere until who knows what happens? Maybe they reestablish his power somehow in some portion of Syria.
Yeah, perhaps. And if it doesn't work out, maybe he'll get the boot, or maybe he'll just become their little, four-legged friend, if you will, because you can't really trust Vladimir Putin.